on Refocused Radio. Once again, we are here today, and just like in time, we have another amazing show line for y'all today. Man, today we're going to be talking to Jesse Hartman. He's the co-owner of Hartman Tutoring since 2006, over 20 years of tutoring experience. He began tutoring as a SAT tutor, a teacher while studying college. And once again, like always, we have storytelling, we have the secret sauce, and we have a guy, Jesse, who's also in the music industry as well. So we're going to have a fun time all about not just his story, but everything that he's been able to accomplish. So first and foremost, Jesse, I want to say thank you for clearing your calendar today. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate you being here. So let's start from the very beginning. We know that you are also into music, but kind of take us back to when you started this company, co-owner of Hartman Tutoring, and what inspires you to make that happen?
Sure. So I had no interest in education, either as a student or as a prospective up-and-coming teacher. I had no plans of working in the educational field of tutoring, teaching, professorship, anything like that. But I graduated undergrad with a degree in philosophy and television production, also known as nothing. And was looking for a path. And immediately upon graduating, my mother, who was working as a tutor, she had a few students that were working on material that was a bit over her head, perhaps some sort of complex math, and she asked me to help out. So I grabbed one of her students and did a few sessions. That student told a friend about me, a friend told a neighbor told a sibling told a cousin, and suddenly I had a job. I didn't mean for this to become my long-term, full-on adult career, but it transpired that way, and it worked out quite lovely. My mother and I became business partners, and after about a year or two, we had too many students between the two of us, so we started hiring independent contractors to work for us, which led to us forming an official LLC. That meant that my role expanded from just being a tutor to suddenly being a business owner. And I was recruiting staff members, training them, kind of defining the way that we approach one-on-one education so that we can have a website and have more articulated materials. And that was really my role for the next 20 plus years. Since then, my mother has retired. Our company has expanded a bit. And I now have a lot of hours under my belt with this somewhat accidental job of mine. So it was something that I didn't mean to do, but I'm very glad that I ended up doing it. It's a passion, it's a joy, and it's a real honor to be able to work with kids the way I have been.
And when you look at the brand, Hartman Tutoring, what do you believe set you guys apart? Because being in New York is already crowded. So how did you guys be able to pinpoint who you wanted to serve?
Right. That's a great question. Really, the sincerity and the authenticity of our approach, I do think set us apart from a lot of other businesses. A mother and son duo, a small little family company in Lower Manhattan. We were rivaling Kaplan and Princeton Review, and a lot of these real behemoths that were industry titans and that they're out to make a buck. We were really just in it to help out some kids and some families. And because I wasn't really viewing it as a business path or even as a career, I was really just in it because I enjoyed it and because it was what I was doing at the time. I think students took to that and families took to that quite naturally. And we were kind of good at it. The results came in really positively. Not only did the children enjoy their experiences, but their test scores were good, their grades were going up, their skills were evolving. So there was a real natural quality to our intention, and that translated into our approach and the feeling that customers and clients got. And so it wasn't until maybe 10, 12, 15 years later that I started thinking about how to market, how to get the word out, how to really try to get our brand in a manner that could be discussed and repeated. But that was after the fact. The good news is it really happened quite organically. And I do think it was the lack of business acumen that gave us the ability to succeed. Beginner's luck, very often, if you're trying too hard to achieve an intended outcome, that intention can sometimes override your ability. And all we had was raw ability and passion for what we were trying to do. And I think that came through. So our interest in personalizing our educational models and being child-centric and teaching to the kid who's really sitting next to us, not just using some sort of paradigm or boilerplate approach to education, really made us different from most other companies. And it seemed to be enjoyable for the students and had a positive outcome for the families.
Once again, listen to our Refocused Radio and watching us online, talking to our guest today, Jesse Hartman. Go to his website, hartmantutoring.com. I noticed you on your website, you have numerous awards for the company. Kind of share with the audience how that kind of even further separates you from others who have similar service.
Sure. I appreciate you checking that out. There's a few websites and organizations that have recognized our ability to stand out, I suppose, from other comparable organizations. There's one in particular called Expertise. They've had us on their notable test prep instructor lists for New York for about a decade straight now. And my understanding is that it's a combination of the testimonials that parents will leave and also the results that are just empirically based. There's no denying that our students get into these upper echelon schools when we're working on admissions programs with them. So the combination of the families really seeing that from session to session, week to week, month to month, their children are looking forward to the experience of being tutored or going through test prep or whatever it might be. And then when it's all said and done, they have something to show for it. It's not just a pleasant ride. It's a meaningful destination. I feel like a lot of times tutoring or test prep companies can achieve one or the other. We've been able to accomplish both, which really was the goal. We didn't want the student to be kicking and screaming as they work their way towards better grades or a better understanding of a certain subject. We wanted them to find meaning and purpose in the work that they were doing with us, and hopefully be able to gain skills that go beyond test day. Working towards a better grade in math class or towards a certain admissions success story into a new high school or college is one thing, but being able to have some abilities and maybe gain some understanding, gain some mindsets about learning overall that can be applicable in a more sustainable manner really was the goal. And these organizations that have adorned us with a few nice words seem to confirm that.
And being able to do this, sustain this kind of success for 20 plus years, I mean, that's a testimony in itself. Have you noticed any trends currently in the world of education that you feel are shaping how students are learning today?
That's a good question. There's somehow a lot of years for me to look back on and try to gauge what's changed. I don't know how I've gotten this far along there, but I have. So really the first 5, 6, 7 years that I was tutoring, what I saw in terms of education reminded me a lot of what I had experienced as a student. There was homework, there were tests, we tried our best. Certain subjects were easier than others for most kids. Certain subjects were more enjoyable. Very often the teacher rapport with his student would dictate how much a kid liked the class or not. And you tried and things went as well as they could, and that was kind of school. What I noticed maybe after 5 or 6 years, probably starting around 2007, 2008, is that students no longer really viewed themselves in a nuanced manner. They were no longer looking at some classes being easier than others, some teachers being easier to make a connection with than others. They viewed most of it, learning and education, and perhaps themselves and the world, in this sense of binaries, in this world of extremes, of black or white, where a class was either easy or impossible, where a teacher was either their best friend or their enemy, where a certain subject was either naturally something that they could gravitate towards or was just they were never going to understand it. And this all or nothing approach really changed the way that they viewed themselves as learners. And learning is really based on nuance. Learning is this incremental staircase where you start out knowing very little about something and you incrementally gain a further understanding and you gain some skills and you put them to practice. And after practice, you gain mastery. This takes time. And students were no longer really viewing that staircase as something that they even believed was possible for them to climb, let alone that they had interest in taking the time to deal with and the emotional investment to grapple with not being great at something for a sustained period of time, they really just said, okay, I'm a third grader and I'm good at math and I'm bad at writing. Or I'm a fifth grader and I'm okay in the classroom, but I'm a bad test taker. And this is a permanent condition of mine. And this was kind of a new form of self-referential thinking that I hadn't really seen or heard of much before this. But it was also a way that it seemed young people viewed the world in general in these very binary terms. So it became not only a challenge, but really a goal for me and my team to dive in and work with students on gaining an appreciation for nuance regarding themselves, education, and perhaps the world around them. And to recognize that these binary ways of thinking, they might feel real in the moment, especially to children, but that doesn't mean that that's all that there is. And the belief in progress, incremental progress, is vital to the learning process. So that became really paramount to what we were doing.
And speaking of progress, I mentioned earlier in the intro that you are also an accomplished music artist as well, songwriter. Tell us a little bit about when did that started? Because obviously 20 plus years, you were still being busy with Hartman Tutoring. So what got you interested into saying, you know what, let's give music a try?
Yeah, it's a good question. And you're right. These were parallel endeavors of mine. I grew up listening to hip hop and writing songs, writing poetry, writing rap verses, freestyling, being in battles. This was just kind of a part of my childhood. When I was in middle school and high school, this was something that I did with my friends for fun in all types of capacities. This was in the 90s when being enamored with hip hop as a kid was the same as just kind of being into pop culture. It's just what I knew around me. And when I got to college, I recognized that there were other kids who were into rapping and they were actually doing it and they weren't very good. And then I would look at what's going on like in the mainstream music world. And I wasn't like, all right, people are doing things, but it's not stuff that is completely above and beyond what I feel like I'm capable of doing. So I put together a group and we did kind of a local thing for a while. But we got recognized pretty quickly by this talent agency in New York. And we started getting taken around to showcases. And people were pretty receptive to what we were doing early on. And so that was kind of all the validation I needed to recognize that this passion that I had, this interest that I had, there was an audience for it. And whether that was a business audience in terms of these management groups or just fan bases, people who are interested in just hearing this music, it resonated. So I kept on going with it, mostly on the back burner because I was still trying to put together a company and run this tutoring game. But around 2007, 2008, I started taking it more seriously. The internet became more of a factor. And so I realized that I could put out music without having a real label deal, without having much accolades. I could do the local thing for performance and for networking and for fun, and then put out music for the rest of the city, country, world to have access to. And that went pretty well as well. I gained a bit of a following in the New York City underground scene and online. This was back when blogs were really big, and people were receptive. So I made it a part of my life. As I was tutoring and running around the city, I was also very much so in the studio, at festivals, on tours, playing local shows, getting out as much as I could, and putting out projects. So from around 2008 or 2009 to 2013, 2014, I put out, I believe, 5 full-length projects. Had a few songs that got around quite a bit, had a lot of fun, made a lot of friends, and then hung it up. So I haven't put out any music in about a decade. But it was a very significant part of my life, and I do believe contributed to my growth as a tutor and as a business owner and as a person.
Once again, listening to Refocused Radio and watching us online, talking to our guest today, Jesse Hartman. Go to his website, hartmantutoring.com. And let's talk a little bit about the arts, because you hear a lot of times arts are important in part of a kid's education, you know, whether it's painting or music, sound. For you as a creative, were there ways that you saw yourself using the arts to incorporate with how you engage with your clients in tutoring?
That's a good question. It's something that a lot of my friends used to advocate quite a bit. They'd be like, you should combine tutoring and rapping, obviously. Like, go make songs about the Declaration of Independence. Go make songs about Pythagorean theorem. And I refused, flat out. Didn't want to integrate the two. I felt that it would trivialize my actual passion for hip hop to start rapping about John Wilkes Booth or whatever. And it would also kind of water down my ability to properly educate kids if I was doing it in the form of rap. And then Lin-Manuel Miranda came around and proved me wrong. I should have listened to my friends, because wow, did he do that? Not to say that I could write a musical, but the notion of integrating the worlds of history with hip hop, there's a natural inclination because it's communication. It makes sense to deliver a message in any way that you feel passionate about and that would be received well. So the idea of bringing music and education together, I mean, if you just think about little kids, right? Like how much of the learning that little children go through is through song. Even as we get older, we learn a lot of complex material through, mnemonic devices, kind of silly sing-songy ideas. There's a reason that it works. I never felt inclined to bring the two together. I made a few songs about or that had to do with education or tutoring simply because most of my music was very autobiographical, and I didn't feel like I wanted to completely leave that out. A number of my students showed up in some of my music videos. There were a few opportunities for the two worlds to mix, but I never went so far as to try to like make an educational hip hop album or even song. I had my approach to making music, and I had my approach to tutoring, and aside from just kind of my personality, and having an appreciation for language and wordplay, and etymology, and, these are things that were elements in my music, but also in my tutoring. But aside from those kind of cross-transferable interests, there wasn't much mixing going on of those two.
When you look at the impact you've been able to have on the youth with providing these services for tutoring, what do you believe could contribute to a student not engaging in their studies? Because sometimes the disconnect can be just their environment, or sometimes it can just be how they strategize, how they want to learn. What do you believe are some of the things that contribute to that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you nailed it. There's a lot of different ways that it can come up. Most of these situations are going to be case dependent. So overall, if I had to give kind of one generalized answer, students who lack an understanding of meaning or purpose behind their work are usually not going to be as motivated as they could be. And motivation is a tough one, because we think of kids, a lot of parents will use the word lazy to describe their kids as if it's a permanent condition. Or they might, we use in sports, we hear the word motor, oh, this guy's got a good motor. Well, what are these ideas of laziness and good motor? Like, these are really these ineffable kind of nebulous qualities that are hard to really believe could be improved upon or changed. But motivation actually is usually tied to incentive or an understanding of meaning or purpose. And a lot of kids, if you just tell them, hey, you're trying to get a good grade because grades matter, that's not always going to land. And that, in fact, can be more pressure than would be helpful. It can be counterproductive sometimes to have a kid just think about their grades. I've said a number of times that I could change the name of my tutoring company to What'd You Get? Because that's kind of how kids approach school. It's just, what'd you get? What'd you get? What'd you get? And it's not, what did I learn? It's not, did I gain anything from this unit? It's not, oh, on that test I performed well or I displayed my skill. It's just, what'd you get? And it's difficult to bring a lot of students down a lot of paths with just that as a carrot or as a stick, depending on how you look at it. So the notion of inherent meaning, or the lack thereof, can often define how well a student's going to do. Effort is a skill, I believe, and you can increase and enhance that skill by providing certain perspectives. And very often that perspective is going to include how to gain an appreciation for why you're doing what you're doing. And the answer to why are we doing this can't just be because it's your job, or so that you can get into a good high school, or so you can get into good college, or so you can get a good job. That isn't always enough. So we work on meaning quite a bit, enhancing the student's understanding. And this is not just in the grand scheme of things, not just explaining the meaning of school. We do that, but also just the meaning of this particular exercise, this particular part of the curriculum. Why do I have to learn this? Why do I have to get better at this? How is this going to benefit me? We work on these things because it really does make a difference for the kids' understanding of how to put their best foot forward as consistently as possible.
When you think about life skills being fundamental as students are progressing throughout their educational careers, what are some of the things that you've seen with your success stories that is like maybe a light bulb goes off and they're like, wow, like I'm really going to start taking these tools more seriously versus like you referenced to before. Sometimes we like what you get on your report card, and it's a little bit more deeper in that because life comes at you. Is ready or not, here I come.
Yeah, it's a good point. There's a lot of opportunities to fall victim to the surface level of school. It's the students who, and very often this comes with maturity, to be honest, but it's the students who allow themselves to be in that moment of discomfort when it's not going great, who end up with these big success stories when it's all said and done. It's the students who feel comfortable with failure. And by failure, I don't mean like failing a test necessarily, but being in the moment where you look at something, you say, I don't know how to do this. Let me try anyways. Or this didn't go well last time. Let me try a new approach. Or I'm not sure if this is going to work, but let's give it a go and see what happens. These are inherently scary experiences for a lot of kids because they don't want to see what happens. They don't want to do something that didn't go well last time. They don't want to do something they don't know how to do. Very often, if I ask a kid, what's your favorite subject? And what class are you doing the best in? They're going to be the same. And that's not necessarily because they actually enjoy that class. They just enjoy that they're good at it. And I don't even really necessarily believe that they enjoy that they're good at it. They would just prefer that than being bad at it. So it's the students who are capable and resilient enough to withstand that discomfort, even if it's momentary, of not being good at something that have the best chance of improving. And it's a mindset as much as it is an actual momentary experience that is necessary as school gets harder. When the stakes get higher and the expectations increase, you better be prepared. So if it's in 5th, 6th, 7th grade that you're gaining that resiliency, that's going to be very useful when you're in high school. If you're only building those resiliency muscles in 9th, 10th, 11th grade for the first time when the stakes are high and the work is really hard, that's going to be much more challenging. So we work on these, you refer to them as life skills. We work on these things with kids as young as possible so that they can begin to get these muscles worked on so that when the stakes are high, it's not their first time. They've been there, done that, and then they can actually start to put them to use.
Once again, you're listening to Refocused Radio and watching us online, talking to our guest, Jesse Hartman. Go to his website, hartmantutoring.com. A couple more questions for you. When you look at the importance of reading and writing, back in my day, we used to write in cursive, and now it's, I don't know, maybe it's just text messages, I'm not sure, but as a professional in the educational world, what's some of the things that maybe you either talk to the student or maybe the parents to emphasize just the basics and how we approach our daily tasks? Because reading and writing is one thing, but understanding how crucial it is at an early start is another.
Right. That's a very good point as well. So what I'll talk to kids about is if they have a big test coming up, whether it's a standardized test or just a test in school, they want to have a good showing during that test. And usually a good showing during a test, just like any other type of performance, is going to be indicative of how well they're kind of feeling that day. They want to have a good day. And when does a good day start? A good day starts the night before. So I talk about planning quite a bit. These are executive functioning skills. We talk about time management, organization, planning. And it's not like it's a given that everybody, particularly children, is good at making a plan. Making a plan is hard. Sticking to it is hard. Seeing it all the way through is hard. And having a plan that succeeds is hard. So a life skill that really is useful is how to get good at planning. And very often this requires other executive functioning skills, such as time management, some sort of accountability, organization in general, autonomy. And it also meaning has a role here as well. Because why would a kid want to think about how to plan 24 hours in advance when the test is tomorrow afternoon? They don't necessarily recognize that if they walk their dog at 6:30 p.m., instead of walking their dog at 9 p.m., that's going to contribute to them getting a good score on the test tomorrow at 1 p.m. So we look at this approach from a macro level, trying to help them recognize that there are pieces to a puzzle that lead to success. And it isn't just what you do in the moment when you're asked to perform, it's how you prepare for that performance. And we'll use analogies, whatever the kid is into. We'll talk about dance, we'll talk about arts, we'll talk about basketball, whatever it might be. You can imagine anybody who's a high performer in a field that interests a kid. I know that person is thinking about how they're going to get to bed the night before the big game, the big show, whatever it might be. So we try to really put kids in these positions so they can think about these things from a more zoomed out perspective. And then we work on it. We practice making plans, and we also put them in a position to feel confident enough to make a plan, to see it through. There's a lot of studies that show that self-esteem and the ability or the interest to make a plan and see it through are intrinsically connected. And it's a tough connection, because if a kid has low self-esteem, they're less likely to make a plan. And then if they don't make a plan, they're not going to do that well. And then their self-esteem is going to continue to be low. Versus the kids who have higher self-esteem, who believe that making a plan is going to prove to be useful, they make a plan that usually helps them succeed, and the self-esteem goes up. So we work on all these different elements. And a lot of times parents don't realize that that's what we're doing. They'll call me up and say, hey, my kid needs help with math. And all of a sudden I'm talking to them about planning and basketball. But these things all do kind of go hand in hand. The goal is for them to be able to see how these different elements connect and then be able to work on all of them.
You kind of touched on it, but my last question would be, when you think about the keyword confidence for an individual who is going through their educational career and getting prepped for the real world, how does some of these tool sets, if you will, help sharpen their confidence and their ability to adapt when challenges do come?
Yeah. So my goal is to make sure that students and learners realize that their job is not necessarily to get an A on a test or to get into the school they're trying to get into, because they can't always control that. Their job is to do their best, period. And I want kids to recognize that they can feel completely satisfied and comfortable with their result as long as they can look at their own work, their own effort, and say, I did my best. And that isn't just kind of like a pat on the back, be like, oh, you tried. It didn't go well, but at least you tried. I don't want to talk about just, I tried. I want to hear, I really tried my best. That means that I looked at the entire situation. I figured out what was needed. I looked at each individual facet of what was needed, and I used all my tools, all my resources, all my different mindsets and ideas towards each element, and I did everything I could. Did that land me with an 87? Fine. I'm proud of that 87. I did everything I could to achieve that 87. I know that if I didn't bust my butt the way I did, I wouldn't have gotten that 87. It would have been worse. So I'm happy with that 87. Or if it's a 95, it's a 72, whatever it might be. Having kids take ownership of their effort and see that that's their responsibility very often leads to a sense of confidence, because they recognize that it's up to them. It isn't up to somebody else to tell them that they did a good job. It's up to them to recognize, and this obviously is difficult for younger kids, but there's a metacognitive experience that adolescents can go through where they start to think about themselves. How clearly am I working? How well am I putting this all together? And the more that they believe that their effort is their job, not the outcome, the more their confidence can really be open to changing and evolving.
There you go. That's what I hope people will be able to take away from this conversation. And maybe if you can share this with a friend, share it with anybody, honestly, man, just share this, because I think this is a great masterclass for those who not just appreciate tutors who help those with the education process, but just real life itself, fundamentals, how we approach life from the basics. This was a great conversation. Been listening to Refocused Radio, watching us online, talking to Jesse Hartman. Go to his website, hartmantutoring.com. Like always, can't believe it went so fast, but I wanted to say it to you, Jesse, thank you for your time.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.